Camper vans are great in that they don't take up a bunch of space. You can park them basically anywhere. The trade-off here is that the inside is also small, especially mine. It can be the size of a small kitchen or a bedroom, but not both at the same time. To solve this problem, I'm going to make my bed, and then I'm going to make it disappear. And I have to do this very quick because I am leaving for a week-long van camping trip in about 4 days. There are a few ways to make your bed disappear in a camper van. One of the most common is to have the bed turn into something like a table. These work well in making a bed disappear, but I don't really want to sleep on a Tetris bed of couch cushions that my friends have been farting into all evening. Another way to disappear a bed is by folding it away like a Murphy bed. This is a pretty good idea, though for a full width, you kind of need the bed to fold in the middle and flip up on both sides, and now you have a really narrow area between the folded beds or a really thin mattress, which is a definite no-go for me. The way I chose to make my bed disappear is to raise it up to the ceiling. The bed is at bed height while sleeping, and during the day it's tucked away neatly up high. You can buy mechanisms that will do this for you, but they have a couple of drawbacks. One is that they cost way too much. The other is that they don't have the lift range I want. So I'm going to have to design something unnecessarily complicated and then build it hastily over the next few days. But to get the bed all the way up to the top, we will have to start at the bottom. This van came with a ratty insulated floor that was covered in what I can only assume is the blood of all the people that the previous owner murdered in this van. I threw that out, but before I did, I used it as a template to cut out a wood floor. I had originally stained this wood, but it turned out looking terrible, probably because I didn't read or follow any of the instructions. So I repainted it with some deck paint. Looks pretty good. The floor is in 3 pieces. I have these 2 extra pieces back here because I'm adding these 2 metal bars. These will tie into the cargo mounts, and I also added some extra fasteners through the body. I want these to be strong because they will be holding seats. I'm putting 2 seats way in the back, so my passengers will feel like they are in the world's creepiest limo. I put them back here because nobody will be sitting here while the bed is in use, and also because I'm going to add a table here and a couple of more chairs to have a place for people to sit around. The chairs in the back are from the second row of a Honda Odyssey minivan. They're good because they can be relatively easily removed from the van, they fold flat, and they have integrated seat belts. They latch into the minivan with 2 hooks on the front and a couple of latches on the back. I designed a steel structure to put them at the right height. This thing is way overbuilt. I used really heavy wall steel. I designed this whole thing to hold up to a crash of 60 Gs, which is kind of the point where people start dying anyway. I feel like it's pretty substantial, especially compared to the flimsy crap that was in my old RV that didn't even survive 1 cliff dive. There is one problem with having a bed raise up to the ceiling, and that is the ceiling is narrower. This is not a box van, so the sides of the van curve in, leaving the top narrower than the width at the belt line where the bed will be. It ends up being about 5 feet wide. This means that I need a ledge on both sides to come out and hold the center part of the bed. But since I also need storage in this van, I'm actually just going to build out what I'm calling bookshelves. To support the sides of the bed, these bookshelves will need to come out from the wall about 9 inches, which is coincidentally exactly how much the wheel wells stick out. So I designed them to have 3 shelves with a long center section over the wheel wells and a shorter section behind. I also added a front plate for a couple of reasons. One, I need it to support the bookshelves so they don't matchbox collapse to the front or back. Typically, you'd have a back surface on your bookshelves for this, but I don't. I also want these in the front so I can have a little ledge that keeps things from sliding out onto the floor while I'm driving. Also, this way I can cover the wheel wells. I started to draw out cut plans for this, but there are some detailed cuts that need to clear the body, so I considered printing out 1-to-1 drawings on a plotter. I don't have a plotter, but I remembered that I have a CNC router that I can stick a Sharpie in and use as a full-size plotter. But then I remembered I have a CNC router that I can stick a router bit in and use as a CNC router. So I did that. I cut out all the pieces, nicely nested together with little tabs holding them together like a giant model kit. I screwed these all together using pocket screws. I like pocket screws, mostly hidden, but easy. I also glued all the seams so it would be stronger and hopefully not squeak and rattle. I stained them with some floor stain I found. These things are going to see a lot of use and abuse, so I wanted something really robust. I insulated up the wheel wells before I installed these, and I also added a rubber strip to the bottom so they hopefully will not squeak while I'm driving like the old RV did. Don't be like the RV. Remember what happened to the RV. I had to do some modification to clear some small things in the van, but mostly they were a great fit. These came out really nice. I'm really happy with them. I still hate woodworking. I bought some baskets for these to store things, but they're pretty flimsy and cheap. I couldn't find anything that fit the exact size that I liked, so I just 3D printed some. Bamboo just came out with a new printer, the H2S. They sent one to me to test out, and I did. It has a larger print volume than any other Bamboo printer. It has an active heated chamber up to 65°C. You can get it with a cutter and a 10-watt laser. Super precise, super fast. This is now my go-to printer for most things. It's really good for the kind of fabrication things that I do. Bamboo is a sponsor of this channel, and if for some reason I haven't yet convinced you to buy a Bamboo printer, or if you already have one and are considering another, click the link and check out the H2S. I did get to use most of the printer volume on one of these baskets. I'd heard a clever idea somewhere, and I wish I could remember where, but the idea was to put a magnet inside the basket so they stay in place on the road. This is a great idea for me since the back of the bookshelves is steel. So I set up the printer to pause at the right layer and dropped in a magnet. I put some super glue on there so the steel nozzle wouldn't try to pull it out. This worked really well. I'm going to print a few more of these with heavier walls and maybe some dividers inside, but overall, a pretty great idea. So we started at the bottom and now we here. The bed. Specifically the platform the mattress sits on. I want this to be thin so it doesn't take up a bunch of space when it's stored high, but I want it to be stiff so it doesn't turn into a hammock when I sit on it. For this, we're going to make a torsion box. A torsion box is just a flat table that is very stiff and strong without being too heavy. This is accomplished with a pretty fundamental engineering concept. Let's say you're heading to lunch at the pizza place, but there is a ravine in the way. You lay down a 2x4 and walk across to go stuff your face with cheese and bread. But on the way back, you know that a 2x4 is going to buckle under the weight of your fat, pizza-filled face. So what do? You just flip it sideways. A 2x4 is a lot stronger and stiffer sideways than it is laying flat. When you stand on a beam, the bottom is in tension and the top is in compression, and the middle isn't really doing anything. So if you can move material away from the neutral axis, you get a much more efficient section. The extreme version of this is an I-beam where the top and bottom are doing all the work and the middle is just there to keep it connected. A torsion box is basically just an I-beam in a rectangular form. You have one sheet of plywood on the top, one on the bottom, separated and connected by strips of wood in the middle. I'm using 1/4-inch plywood on the top and bottom and 1-inch thick dowels in the middle. I also added 1-inch foam to the empty pockets just to support the plywood in the middle of the open sections. I had a really clever idea with this at first. We glued up everything and taped up the outside. Then I ran a vacuum line inside so it would suck out the air and squish it all together. This did not work. We didn't get a good vacuum seal, so I had to rip it all apart, sand it down, and try again. This time I glued all the dowels to one side to start, clamping it together in clever and unique ways. And then we fit the foam in and glued the opposite side plywood. I also added more ribs inside just to make sure there was enough area of wood glue. I also added nails for some extra insurance in case my glue situation wasn't great. This left a bunch of disgusting glue on the sides, so I got a straight edge and a router and cleaned them up the easy way. To lift the bed up to the ceiling, I'm using a system similar to what a lot of people use to lift things like roof carriers and kayaks off their car in the garage. There's a 90-degree worm gear that is not back drivable that rotates a shaft. The shaft has ropes attached to it that coil up around the shaft as the worm gear is rotated. There are some pulleys to guide the ropes out to the corners. I'm doing pretty much exactly this except upside down. In fact, I found someone selling just the worm gear part on eBay, so I got just that. To hold the shaft and to reinforce the span of the bed for good measure, I added spars going along the bottom. These have reinforcements in the middle with a hole drilled through them. The shaft just goes through these holes. I originally designed these with needle bearings for the shaft to ride on, and then I just printed some bearings for the shaft to ride on, and then I decided that wood was probably good enough. In theory, if the bed is balanced, there isn't actually any load on the bearings. It's probably fine. Instead of pulleys, I'm using fair leads. You see these a lot on boats for lines to run through. I printed the outer fair leads going through the wood spars, and I printed inserts for the aluminum ones in the middle just to add a smoother surface. I offset the middle ones slightly in hopes that one side will coil up to the front and the other to the rear. To get the worm gear drive in the right place, I 3D printed a drill guide that would align with a shaft and guide 2 drill holes through the spars in the right place. This worked really well, getting the gear mechanism in exactly the right spot. I also printed this adapter to turn the worm gear with a drill. Eventually, I will add a permanent motor and a switch for this. With everything assembled, I installed it myself. Probably should have waited for a friend to help with this, but whatever. I tested it out and it worked. I still need to adjust the lengths of the 4 lines so it raises flat, but it did the lifting, speed was good, and the ropes wound up correctly underneath. There are 2 things left to do. One is to fill these gaps here on the sides. For this, we will go back to the H2S. I just printed a bunch of spacers, locked together with some dovetails. I am still printing a few of these, and I hope they will be finished when I leave in a few hours. I bought one of these tri-fold mattresses so it's easier to get in and out of the van, and also I can fold one side to get it to squish up to the ceiling. The last thing I have to do is trim the mattress to fit, but I don't have time to do that, so we're just going to shove it in there and make it work. And there it is, a disappearing bed. Just barely in time for me to drive to the desert and sleep on it for a week straight. Hopefully I didn't forget anything important, because if I did, it's going to be a real rough week.